The sky is falling for Penn State football fans, right? The sky is falling. Today on the BWI Daily Edition, we're going to talk about a rough Thursday for Penn State football recruiting with several bad news items developing yesterday. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll be talking to recruiting insider Ryan Snyder about Marcus Stokes, what the situation was there, Treyaun Webb, Cam Seldon, and of course, it's not all doom and gloom, despite the fact that I started by yelling at you, the sky's falling! We'll get into all of that and some stuff coming up this next couple weeks on the BWI Daily Edition. Let's get to it. So, Ryan Snyder, my co-host today on the BWI Daily Edition, joining us here. Is the sky falling for Penn State football?
No. I'll leave it at that. It's been a rough 24 hours. Sorry. Nah, it's not many rough for. Look, kids are going to go elsewhere. That happens. More so just maintaining our message board rough. Although it actually hasn't been too bad. I've seen way worse over the years. I've seen substantially worse over the years. So
yeah,
it's a loss, but it's not the end of the world.
So let's get into the details from yesterday. I think this sums it up pretty well. Marcus Stokes flipping to Florida was the biggest surprise of the day, but two other things that happened almost simultaneously. Four-star athlete and one of the highest remaining players on Penn State's uncommitted board, Cam Seldon, chooses Tennessee, and Treyaun Webb chooses Florida in a situation that seemed a little bit premeditated from the Gators to have a very good Thursday. So let's start with Stokes because that is the big news of commit flipping to another school. Can you tell us about the timeline and what you've been able to find out about what happened between Stokes, Penn State, and the Gators?
Yeah, so Stokes got an offer from Florida last week. I believe it was like June 26th, 27th. It was right before he went to the Elite 11. So I know he informed Penn State of the offer, but it still came as a surprise. I don't think Penn State, I mean, he was pretty firm with his commitment. I mean, everybody felt pretty good about Stokes. And then I think it was just kind of the suddenness of it, how it just kind of happened so quickly that maybe caught some people off guard. But Penn State did know about the offer, which obviously he did announce publicly, which, caught myself and a lot of colleagues off guard. But it is what it is, man. I mean, Stokes, look, he lives right outside of Gainesville. Florida did not offer until right now. I mean, I know people always talk about commitments and what's it mean anymore and all that stuff. I do look at this a little bit differently when an in-state school, one of pretty much the closest major program to him, when they don't offer until now, it does change some things a little bit. But it's certainly a loss for Penn State, though. When we look down the quarterback board and see what's kind of out there, it's they got to figure something out now. Whether they go transfer portal or 2023, only time's going to really tell. But they're in a tough spot now because pretty much all the top quarterbacks are off the board.
Yeah, and that's kind of the story here. It's not just about Marcus Stokes. It's about if this had happened 3 months ago, you have time to adjust. But here in the middle of or the beginning part of July, there's not as much flexibility. There's not much wiggle room with a couple of guys that maybe Penn State was interested in earlier. They've committed to other programs. So I guess that becomes the question then is this something you can recover from in this process? Marcus Stokes did flip from Florida from Penn State. So I'm not asking you to predict if who it might be, but do you think that Penn State has the opportunity to do that as well? Would you think that that's a possibility, or do you think it's more likely what you were talking about previously?
Why not? I mean, they flip guys every year. So, of course, they can flip somebody. There's talented guys out there who they can get a foot in the door with. The thing is, you have 7 on-campus visit days left until the season starts. And when the season starts, especially at the quarterback position, these guys want to be focused on their teams. That's why you're seeing a surge of commitments in June and July. So Penn State has about 14 days here, a little over that, I guess, 15 days to get a foot in the door with somebody, try and get them on campus here that last week of July. And only time will tell. I mean, I did a breakdown today, mentioning a few guys that I'm going to keep an eye on. We're going to keep that behind the paywall for subscribers to know who I'm talking about there. But there are definitely some candidates out there. And why would Penn State not at least try and get a foot in the door with a few of these 2023 guys? But again, the issue is just where is, I don't want to say the bottom, but where's the cutoff line, I guess, as far as who you'll pursue, and how important is 2023 when you have the transfer portal out there and you have 3 quarterbacks on campus already who have 4 years of eligibility. So that's just something they all have to figure out. But at the same time, Penn State was just in this position last year where they had 2 scholarship guys. So that's why I don't think there's any world where they just say, screw it, we're not even going to bother about 2023 and we'll move on because, you know,
you got to get a quarterback every year. You've got to get a quarterback every year. I just, it's too important of a position. And a couple years ago, they got 2 quarterbacks, a 4-star in Michael Johnson Jr. and another by some that was recruiting service, a 4-star in Taquan Roberson. And we all saw how that worked out. Like, not that Bo Pribula and Drew Aller are an exact equation to those guys. Obviously, we've done our film evaluation. They're different players. But at the same time, just the numbers at the position and the fact that guys that you think might work out sometimes don't. And you can go through volume is important at that position as any other position in sports. So I think you got to get a guy every single year. And Stokes was a great fit for this class, and now he's moved on. So they got to find another guy to fill that role going forward. Let's move on to Cam Seldon, because this is another situation where there were some rumblings late that you were reporting on. And the way you talked about the switch to offense felt like there was a deeper current there. Is that a part of this story, him going to Tennessee? Are there other factors at play there? What was your read of the situation, what you found out with Cam Seldon?
Well, Seldon doesn't talk, so
right.
I don't know. I'll be blunt about it. But look, I mean, whenever you're being recruited as a safety for 95% of your recruitment, and all of a sudden he gets on campus and everyone's saying, oh, hey, oh, no, by the way, you're a wide receiver. Something's going on there. It has to be. Tennessee had to be putting in his ear and say, hey, man, screw this safety talk. You're a wideout. You know, you score touchdowns, man. You're a big-time player. And look, it paid off. They got him. So I think you're going to end up, I mean, I'm skipping ahead here, but it's just kind of the same thing with Jason Moore and the whole defensive tackle, defensive end talk. Clearly, Ohio State got on his ear on defensive end, and when most of these other schools were talking about defensive tackle. And I know I skipped ahead there, T. Frank. Sorry, but it's got to be kind of the same thing. It just doesn't make sense that Penn State's recruiting him 90% of the time at one position, and then boom, we get on campus and you try and scramble to talk wide receiver with him. Clearly, that was already kind of planted in his ear. But it's a good pickup for Tennessee, man. Cam Seldon's a hell of a player, and whether he's a wide receiver or safety or a linebacker or whatever it may be down the road, they need players like him in the SEC. Of course, Penn State needs him in the Big Ten as well. But one thing I will say is people have mentioned that, hey, don't sleep on Seldon. We're gonna stay after him hard. So only time will tell on that one. But I expect Penn State to continue pursuing him.
So that leads us to our final player yesterday making news. Treyaun Webb had been very interesting over the last couple of days. He was going to commit on the 30th. He changed his mind. When you'd been talking on the Tuesday edition of the Daily Edition, and previously it'd been like, think he's committing in the next week, got a vague idea of a day, but it never seemed like a firm idea. And then all of a sudden it happens with Marcus Stokes yesterday. So, is that a good summation of it? A guy that you weren't getting a good read on because there was something else going behind the scenes, or was this something that came down to the wire? What was your read there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to call him a silent commit, but I mean, he pretty much told Penn State he's coming to Penn State leading up to June 30th. That's why you saw all those picks go in for Penn State. But then when he paused that commitment date, I mean, again, we're talking about red flags, commitment changes or position changes for Seldon, red flag.
Yep.
Changing your commitment date when all signs are pointing you to end up Penn State 3 days later, red flag. Yep. So there was certainly signs there, and it is what it is. I don't know if this was it was definitely orchestrated. Like, people are like, oh, Florida, they did this like Maryland did for Andre Roy. That's not true. That's not true.
Right.
Florida got a foot in the door with Trey Webb maybe about a week or so ago. Clearly there was some family pushing for Florida. That's all true. And once Webb kind of made it clear to Florida, hey, I'm coming there, he was going to commit next Monday, July 11th. Like, that was done. He was telling Florida reporters that all signs were starting to swing that way a little bit. But then when Marcus, who he's friends with, decides to make that jump too, that's when that back-to-back boom comes. And schools do that all the time, man. They always want to make splashy moves for commitments and get their fans excited and things like that. And that's what Florida decided to do there. So I don't look at this as Florida scheming behind Penn State's back and getting Marcus Stokes to commit to Penn State only to flip him. Andre Roy, that was true. That actually happened.
Yeah.
This isn't that situation. This is Florida getting a foot in the door with a quarterback who, by the way, just time out for a second. This is just a funny way to look at this. Penn State passed on Jaden Rashada to get Marcus Stokes.
Yep.
And then Florida misses on Jaden Rashada and then steals Marcus Stokes. It's just kind of funny the way that circle worked there. But,
you're the reporter, so I'm not going to have you say these things, but these are the other breadcrumbs I've seen, is that Florida apparently had a very enticing NIL package for Jaden Rashada, which he didn't elect to choose to go there. And all of a sudden, Treyaun Webb pushes back his commitment date. After that particular domino fell, Marcus Stokes flips to Florida. I'm just looking. You see this happen. You can draw a line. Maybe it's conjecture on my part, but it seems like that is a reasonable conjecture to make. Ultimately,
it's not naive to think NIL played a part in it. I just don't know. And from my perspective, I'm not just going to rub my mouth and say, Florida paid Marcus Stokes. It's
right.
That's what happened. I don't know that, and it's not Marcus and his father have been great to me. It's not me. It's not fair on me to say that that's the whole reason this happened. But some of those numbers being flaunted, that makes sense.
It doesn't even matter. Like, it's not even a bad thing. It's just a school that's close to you that has an NIL package, possibly, could have this for you. Plus, it's a place you wanted to go. Like, then it becomes kind of a no-brainer. If it's a school you grew up loving, maybe it's in-state, close to home, and they've got this other thing that is legal to do. There is no subterfuge. It is something that you can now do, and underscores for Penn State, if they don't have these things in place, you said this, and again, I'm throwing this as conjecture out there, that Penn State might lose players in the back half of this class because of NIL. And it seems like a place where you could say, if there was one place they lost a player because of NIL, it might be here. But, of course, no one is going to talk about
Rodney Gallagher,
no one's going to admit to it. Yeah, and Rodney Gallagher was another big one. When it comes to the running back conversation, I'm going to beat this drum once again. Penn State seemed like they may be making a decision. They may have to do something, but now it seems like the decision has been made for them at the running back position with Treyaun Webb and London Montgomery. So is there any update on London? You talked about it. Seemed like something was in the works.
Yeah, he should be committed next week. There was a story out in USA Today about a July 11th announcement date. London hasn't put that out there yet. I'll let London do it, but that's kind of the time Ryan I was always being told, July 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that ballpark. But we'll let London put it out there. It should be here. I think he's going to be putting it out here pretty soon, and I would expect Penn State to be the pick. I put in a pick for Penn State last night. I always just held off on that because of the whole Treyaun Webb factor. And yeah, Penn State could take two running backs. I don't think the staff really preferred to take two running backs, but they also weren't going to lose on both of these guys or pass on either of them, I should say, if Webb wanted to come to Penn State and if Montgomery wanted to come to Penn State. But it does open up well for Montgomery now. I still think it would probably end up being a one running back class. I don't see anybody else emerging, but let's see what London decides here in the coming days. I do expect him to announce something early next week, though. Monday, Tuesday, that should be the time frame.
So that seems we have a little bit of clarity there. Let's move on to what was going to be, when I was making the rundown yesterday, the start of the show. Like, we're now getting back to the point where, before all of this stuff happened, the things we were looking to head towards. Earlier this week, you wrote a piece about Kavion Keys, another key part of the Penn State linebacker outlook for 2023. So what's the update there with Kavion?
He has a commitment date set for August 27th. Let's see where that shakes out. Man, that's a long way from now. And these schools, especially North Carolina, Penn State, potentially Florida. He did get an offer from Florida late in May, and the Gators are making a push there. He's talking about maybe taking a visit to Florida, but we'll see if he's able to do that. Of course, there are no official visits allowed in July, so that would require Kavion and his family to pay and make the drive or whatever it may be. So let's see if that actually happens. But I still think North Carolina, Penn State are the two schools to really watch for there. And hey, what is that? 50 some days from now. So
yeah,
I'm It's his birthday, and he wants to announce on his birthday. But I just know these schools are going to be pushing for something sooner than that, especially if Penn State goes on a run here. Penn State will have legs to push a little bit. So I'll just be curious to see if that sticks. But right now, August 27th is the date.
And with maybe some recent developments and some stuff we're going to get into in just a second here, room for three linebackers if Penn State's able to, as you've predicted, land both Tamier Robinson and Tony Rojas. So that's not a problem here in this situation.
No. They only if it's these three though. If they miss on Keys, I don't expect them. But I shouldn't say that because somebody could always emerge. But out of right now, like this is the three. Like I don't expect a Corey Lucius or Penn State to go out there Phil Picciotti or something like that. Like these are the three they want. They would find room for those three. Clearly, Tamier and Tony have always been 1 and 1A. That should end up working out well for Penn State. And then if they can add Keys down the road and have room for it, they will. So that's how I see it playing out right now. But again, talk to me in October, November, and some stud linebacker is going to pop up. And who knows, maybe a third will be back in the mix.
Yeah. Interestingly, too, with you bring up Phil Picciotti, he commits to Oklahoma, and then I think the more interesting news, because that was kind of reported that he was leaning that way, he'll be at IMG this fall. I think that's a really great thing for him in particular because he's a good athlete, but a lot of what his tape was maybe some little too excited to get downhill and attack, and a little bit sloppy sometimes with his footwork, a little too many wasted steps. Going to IMG, you are getting you're getting a head start on college. It's like going to those advanced learning classes in high school where you're getting college credits. You're taking the AP courses. That's what you're getting at IMG. And for a guy with, I think, a kind of a throwback Mike linebacker, linear speed, downhill thumping sort of profile, that's going to help him quite a bit transitioning to college and being a better player. So just on a non-Penn State note, I thought that was a good thing for him that he was able to get that and that he accepted it. Going towards this weekend of maybe not so many great things happening for Penn State, Jason Moore, as you alluded to, is making his decision on Sunday and not going to be the Nittany Lions from what you were saying a little bit earlier.
No, it should end up being Ohio State and Larry Johnson with the Matha prospects, guys. Or not even DeMatha, DMV, I should say. Although, of course, Chase Young, he was from DeMatha, of course. But, this was another one where defensive tackle. That was the talk for the longest time. And then, boom, towards the last 10 days or so, it was, we like him maybe a little bit more as a D-end. Well, that's another red flag, of course. And, I think it's clear that Larry Johnson kind of sees him more as a D-end. He plays D-end in high school. I think it's certainly, he's not one of those guys that's like going to demand to play one position over the other, but right. I think it's obviously clearly more intriguing to him. And then, by the way, it's Ohio State, guys. They're the king of the conference. They've been that way for a reason, for a long time. So, and Larry Johnson, he's one of the best in the world at developing defensive linemen. His ties to Matha and all of the DMV, and then of course Ohio State's success. I don't knock him for it. It's certainly a good decision and a decision that should help him potentially get to the NFL one day. Not that, and just to clarify, not that Penn State wouldn't have been. Of course, Arnold Ebiketie and Adafe Owe, and there's a lot of guys they produced here over the years, but you can't go wrong with Ohio State either.
Yeah, so it's interesting because Penn State is absolutely developing that reputation, especially you look at the transfer portal of bringing in guys that have elite pass rushing talent, but still that it's hard to beat Larry Johnson at Ohio State. Jason's going to have to really work at it to be a defensive end. By the way, it's not just that it's a flashy position. It's not just that it's, as we've talked about with Mega Barnwell, it's as close as you're going to get to a skill position on the defensive line. It's also a financial thing. Like we talk about getting to the NFL with Jason Moore, and I know every athlete thinks they're going to the NFL. But you have more detailed, serious conversations if you're being recruited by Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Penn State about your path to the league. And if you want to play defensive end, there's a lucrative reason to pick that position. It's not just about, a sales pitch from Ohio State, unless the sales pitch is, hey, we think you're a defensive end. We think you can make money at that in the future.
Yeah, totally. I don't have much to add to it. It makes complete sense. And it'll be a big win for the Buckeyes. So, I'm sure Penn State will try and chip away at that, but I Jason's not kind of the guy to commit and play games and then take more visits. I think that commitment will stick.
Well, like you said before, you weren't going to make any predictions about what he was doing until he took visits, and he hadn't taken any.
Right.
And then, the picture kind of developed, and now we have where we are. So I think you good read on that as far as...
I like you, T. Frank. You always remember the stuff I say previously. No one else seems to ever remember that stuff. I like you.
Well, we're not married, so I actually listen to you.
No, that was a good comeback. I got nothing on that one. Go on.
So where does Penn State go from here at defensive tackle? Because they've got 4 guys in the class. I still think Mega Barnwell has the upside to be like Jason Moore at defensive tackle, but it's just the obvious difference is you can see it already with Jason Moore. You've got to project that with Barnwell. Is there another guy that they could add which would be more in line with that? A little more ready, a little more clear-cut of an elite level, or at least a higher level prospect as of right now? Is there anybody that they could go after? What's left on the table?
Will Norman remains the key guy now at defensive tackle. Of course, Camden, New Jersey native, who's now down, of course, at IMG Academy. I just see Cam going deep, though, in his recruitment. I've never left a conversation with Cam and felt like he's not undecided. He's always just kind of bounced around to different schools. Every school's great. Like Cam's one of those guys that I think will probably go deep into the cycle. So we know he's. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Did I say Cam?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Camden. Anyway, Will, not Cam. Will Norman will go deep into the cycle, I think. So we'll see how it plays out. He took one official visit to Florida in the summer. I think Florida was trying to not squeeze him, but Florida's been considered a favorite for him for a little while because of those IMG ties. And think that's why they used that official visit, thinking that, hey, if we use this, we can get him to commit. And he didn't. And it ended up being a good thing, I think, for Penn State, because now they do still have that official visit in their back pocket. There was talk about Will Norman coming to Penn State that final weekend for an official visit. But what I was told is his mom wasn't going to be able to make it. And you don't use an official visit if the parents can't make it, right? You don't ever use an official visit if it's just for the kid, because the whole reason to get them here usually is to make sure that the parents get here and get that full 2-day experience. So Penn State will have that in their back pocket for down the road. We'll see how it plays out. There's a lot of schools there, and I know he's very important for Penn State. He's higher on Penn State's board than I realized months ago, and has really been one of their top defensive tackles for a long time, and I expect that to continue, but only time will tell. One other guy then, too, of course, is Jalen Thompson, the defensive end out of Cass Tech. I have Jalen coming back probably for the Lash Bash here. It's not 100% finalized yet, though. We had a good talk about this earlier in the week, and he's saying like right now it's probably 70-80% chance that he's able to make it up to Penn State for the Lash Bash. We've talked about this before. He had an official visit scheduled, ended up missing the connecting flight and wasn't able to make it to State College. But it may end up working out in the end if Penn State's able to get him for a commitment and then be able to host him later in the year for an official visit. But right now, I think Ohio State, Penn State are the two schools with Jalen. And then, of course, with Ohio State getting Jason Moore, they're in the mix with Umazulu still. It sets up really well for Penn State from the outside looking in. And it looks like Michigan State's kind of passed on him a little bit, looking for some other guys. So this is setting up in a pretty good position for Penn State if they decide to push here, which I think they will.
So for some fans who follow recruiting, maybe haven't been there the whole time, the Lash Bash, at least from what we've seen, is a place where it's kind of a celebration of the class, bringing the committed guys together. Is it typical to have uncommitted guys there in the current cycle? I know guys in the future that you want to have interested in your program have been a part of that, but having a guy who is still out there uncommitted, is that something that's typical? Is that atypical for that particular event?
Yeah, the Lash Bash probably averages about 30, 35-ish players each year. And really, it's pretty much your committed guys. So, of course, all of them won't be able to make it. But it'll probably end up being like a dozen of the commits. And then you'll have about 20 or so uncommitted guys. And it's really always just the best of the best. Get the very best players there. Have it be a select event, an elite event. And you'll probably see somewhere, with Penn State's class, I expect Penn State's class to be probably maybe not right at 20, but somewhere around 20 by the time the Lash Bash takes place, which of course is July 30th. It'll probably only be a handful of 2023 guys, but what you'll see then is the region's top 2024 guys someone like Quentin Martin, for example, Emilio Agard. There's a lot of guys I can go through. They make a lot of sense to be, those top of the region guys who come up for that event. Anthony Specca, for example, Specca was actually at last year's event. So we'll see how it plays out. But I would think we'll see about 20 uncommitted guys at that event, probably about five, 6 2023s, and then the rest will be 2024s.
That's a good preview for later in the month. We'll be talking about later in the month as well. Like maybe next week we'll be previewing that or the class of 24. So stay tuned for that on the BWI Daily Edition. If you want to get some of that inside information, that good stuff from Ryan, he's keeping you up to date in the Lions Den message forum and in the premium articles that he writes for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Those, it's really hard to get them, by the way, Ryan. We're making it super hard. It's a big ask. You need to sign up for $1. One American currency, $1, and you get 12 months of access. And then you get inside information. You can go deep on recruiting. You can make it part of your personality, which once you get in, Ryan, there is no getting out. And there's no going in halfway. Like, you're in when you go into recruiting. So if you want to make that lifestyle choice, it only costs you $1. Some of the other things that we have at the site.
I got a subscription to Rivals, man, in 2003, 2004. Now I'm doing it for a living. It is truly taking me over. At least I get paid now to get sucked into the message board. But yeah, that's what I subscribed to BWI when I was young, and that's here I am now. So
yeah, and it really is. So you are the epitome of, if you want to do it because you love it.
Sort of.
Do you want to talk about Evan Link?
There's not a whole lot to discuss, but I mean, we can. Right. Evan's just quiet. Yeah.
That's the part I want to discuss, is the lack of anything. And there was some information after the official visit. You and your colleagues, our insiders, were doing a great job getting information, setting the scene for what he was thinking. And then it's just been radio silence. Does the longer this go, is that better or worse for Penn State in this situation?
Tough to read because so I know it's been pretty quiet on Penn State's end, but what I don't know is if has it been quiet on Stanford's end. Stanford doesn't have a massive media following or anything like that. People who really dig deep in Stanford football recruiting. So I don't really have anybody I can reach out to and dig on that perspective, but it has been quiet on Penn State's end. Knowing Evan, knowing his family, I think they're just saying, hey, look, we've done how many Zooms with you guys. We've done how many conversations. Let us have a week or two to just get away from the daily talks and all that stuff and just think this all over. So I do truly believe that's the case with this situation. And Evan, just again, from knowing his personality, that makes sense on how he would handle this process. Evan has always told me mid-July makes the most sense, and here we are coming up on that mid-July point. So, again, a commitment from him would not shock me next week, but it also wouldn't shock me the week after that either. It would surprise me if we get into that next visit period, July 25th range, and he's not committed. It's going to be Stanford or Penn State, and of course, with all the turmoil in the Pac-12. Yeah. Maybe that's a good thing for Penn State. I'm not sure. Although at the same time, if you're going to Stanford for football, like, you're going to Stanford because of an education. And not saying football's not important, okay? Yeah. But you're unless Stanford's your only top option, of course. Right. But for a player like him, I mean, that's tells me that he cares more about education than football, which isn't a bad thing.
No.
But I think it'll end up being Penn State. I do.
The Stanford of a decade ago has not been producing specifically offensive linemen the way they had been previously, because there was a run there for a
Stanford's
while.
Been terrible at offensive line. Sorry.
They've been
terrible.
But they got good recruits. They didn't go anywhere. Like, they were able to get a couple of good recruits, and then everything really fizzled out. So yeah, they have not been good at producing talent over the last couple of years. So I think you're right. The only way it would rebound back to helping Stanford is if all of a sudden they're absorbed into the Big Ten in the next couple of weeks.
Right. Yeah, that'll be interesting. But
so maybe that's what he's holding out for. Maybe that's what he's holding out for.
Man, it makes you got 5 months for it. Might as well hold out if that's really what you want. But no, I do think we'll know I really do believe we'll know by like July 20th. I mean, I was hearing July 10, 11, 12 is kind of an area it makes sense, which of course is next week. But Of course, Evan's gotten totally silent really since the last time we talked. I have not talked to him since the end of June. And from talking to Penn State people, they have not really been talking to him either. So time will tell here. But I really do believe it's on both ends. I think he and his family are just kind of saying, hey, get out of our way real quick. We need to discuss this as a family. We're going to take as long as we need. And hey, man, good for him. I really respect that way of handling such a massive decision like this.
Yeah, because it is a big decision for a lot of different reasons: education, football, all those things. I was 0 for 3 last weekend on watching film on players that then committed to Penn State this week.
Sorry.
No, it's part of the job. I'd rather know than not know. I'd rather watch those things. But Evan, interesting profile. Not what I was expecting from Link when I was diving into his full game film. So hopefully, for Penn State fans, he'll commit to the Nittany Lions, so I can share that with you. And that'll be up. We'll have a breaking news on our YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube. Whenever the next Penn State commitment breaks, we'll have a breaking news segment about that. And of course, you can get the class breakdown, the things to know about that player, and the commit story, all at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Quick story I want to tell everybody as I bring this up here. We were discussing the show yesterday, and I wanted to get into, over the last week or so, Penn State, the teams ahead of them, the guys, the teams that are making plays, and the young men that are going to these organizations. How is that affecting the top 10? Not the specific players, but like what does the reshuffling around Penn State look like, and who might leapfrog them during this commitment season? And we were discussing, hey, what do you think about Florida? And then you said, oh, yeah, well, they just flipped Marcus Stokes.
Yeah.
So let's go through, the teams that might get ahead of Penn State in the list, and what you think of those teams and their chances of getting into the top 10 and pushing Penn State out, because that's really what it is. The players that have committed over the last week until yesterday mostly were to the teams ahead of Penn State already. So who are you looking at as the teams that could threaten to push Penn State down to 11 or 12?
Yeah. Well, Miami and LSU being right behind them there at 9 and 10. The LSU has 12 commitments. Miami has 12 commitments. LSU, especially with 9 4-star players and just 3 3-star players, they're setting up in a good position to potentially leapfrog Penn State. But we'll see. Only time will tell, and I can't pretend I've been following LSU too closely. I know they have that new coach bump. Everybody usually gets that, except for Billy Napier at one point, who I guess now does have that new coach bump. But anyway, that's besides the point. But LSU, Miami, they both make a lot of sense. Tennessee has 10 3-star players committed already. Of course, they're at the same number as Penn State. Louisville's having a good run, but if Louisville passes Penn State, I'd still be surprised me. Arkansas has 20 commits. So then you get back down to Oregon and Florida there. And those are two other schools I think certainly keep an eye on with 10 and 11 commitments. Oregon and Florida both have six 4-star players committed. So, somebody to keep an eye on. I think both of those schools would really have to go on a run to get up surpassing Penn State, but they can. Florida is still Florida, and they're certainly in the mix with a lot of guys. But the only other schools I would mention here are Oklahoma, but they have 8 3-stars committed already. Oklahoma's 18, so they're down a little bit in the list. Yep. They have 8 3-stars committed already, so a little bit higher of a number than we're used to seeing. Previously when Lincoln Riley, of course, was there. And you have to go down even further to number 30 to find Texas A&M. After the greatest recruiting class of all time, they have just 5 commitments currently. But we know they're going to get their players. They always do. They have 3 4-star players committed and 1 3-star at the moment. And I guess they have somebody not ranked. I don't know. I have to click on their status there. But Texas A&M is going to get theirs. They always do, and I would expect Texas A&M to be up in that top 10 when it's all said and done. And yes, they have a punter committed. I just looked it up, so that's why he's not ranked. But another interesting school, man, Michigan. Yeah, after the year they just had, Michigan. Number 27 right now, sitting there with 9 commitments. Of course, Raylan Wilson decommitted a few weeks ago. They have since added a handful of quality 4-star players, and Amir Herring, of course, just committed. It was yesterday, I believe. And then Samaj Bridgman as well. The previously at Archbishop Wood, he's now at Ematep Charter. Another solid addition there. But Michigan hasn't really gotten the run that you kind of would expected them to go on. after that season. But I guess when your coach is trying to go to the Minnesota Vikings, that's kind of a reason why.
Yeah, I was interesting the reaction to that, and I said that's not going to help anything. Like that conversation is not going to help anything. And people were telling me it's the college football. This is the norm, and I'm like, is it? It's the norm to leave. It's not the norm to almost leave. You almost get fired. You don't almost leave. So that is an interesting situation with the Wolverines. Any other teams here? You know, you talk about West Virginia with Rodney Gallagher. He's the 1 4-star that's committed to that program. Other schools that have been competing with Penn State for players. It really kind of feels like a lot of this is locked in. North Carolina's been doing pretty well the last couple of years, 10 3-stars. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I was looking at the numbers here. Marcus Stokes was a 3-star in our consensus, so Penn State actually loses a 3-star, not a 4-star, by having him flip to Florida. Now, that does not indicate the impact of that, but it does kind of, just for formalities, Penn State doesn't lose a 4-star, which is a huge part of what we were talking about of how they can remain a top 10 class, even if they were to not get any 5-star players. So anything else in that you find interesting?
Not a whole lot. I mean, just above Penn State, Clemson with 15 4-star players committed. Clemson's having a good rebound this year. They had a year or two that were kind of iffy, but all the schools ahead there, of course, Texas getting their surge after Arch Manning, and you got Alabama and Ohio State and Notre Dame. Notre Dame, man, they are just been on an absolute roll with Marcus Freeman. So, man, if he can develop and get them, get them playing at the same level with Chip Kelly or higher, there's no reason to think that they can't be a serious team in the future after the last class they had and now this one. And of course, Georgia there with 9 4-stars, that's to be expected. And you got Lincoln Riley already with 2 5-stars. So, I mean, I feel pretty good about saying those 7 schools above Penn State, they're probably going to finish above Penn State.
Then you got
LSU is the one that I think could get above Penn State to get to, man. Again, 12 committed players, 9 of whom are 4-stars right now. They have that Chip Kelly bump. From a recruiting perspective, they got all that LSU money in the world to entice guys in different ways with facilities and NIL and all that. So LSU's certainly a team that has my attention. And then, of course, going down to the end there with Texas A&M only having 5 guys, they're going to go on a run at some point, and only time will tell. But those are the 2 schools that stand out to me right now, and I'm sure others will emerge with time. So it's just funny. Last week I was just saying, Penn State can finish their top 10 class, and now, they're missing some guys. Well, maybe they won't. I don't know. It's going to be right there. I mean, I do still believe 10's realistic, though, because if you add in Tony, you add in Tamir, you add in London, all 3 of whom I have picks in for, well, boom, now we're talking about 13 4-star committed players. You add Link, then you got 14. And really, I think 15 4-stars is that number you got to get to if you don't have any 5-stars to have a top 10 class. So they're going to be right there. It's going to be right on the bubble. And just it also is just going to depend on how many 5-stars spread out. If all the 5-stars go to the same schools, they just sit at the top and that's the end of it. If they do spread out and, 10 or so schools are getting 5-star players, that's where it makes it interesting for Penn State.
It'll be fun to watch, and we'll keep you updated both on the Tuesday recruiting show and on our Friday recap and preview here on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. He is recruiting insider Ryan Snyder. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for downloading and listening in the thousands. Thank you for watching here on YouTube in the thousands. We are heading towards the season, so if you're friends with somebody and you want them to get inside Penn State information, you want them to get expert analysis from people who don't do it like we do, make sure you check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and our social channels. We'll talk to you on Monday.